Like everyone's thinking about all this AI. It's like there's basic blocking and tackling.
Yes.
People are being thrown in leadership roles. They don't know what they're doing. Associates don't have any direction. Um, just build, just build the roads.
Right.
Just
Right.
start there.
Just like lawyers don't study marketing and business development when they're in law school, they don't study how to run a business either. These models just exist and run to a certain degree. But then, right, when you get right down to it, there, there's no system, there's no programming. So the basic blocking and tackling,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right, I think is where it's at. And you shared with me earlier when we talked before the sort of path that you went on, or the journey that you went on through those two firms to the discoveries that led you to here, three firms. What brought you through that to the current understanding that you just shared?
Yeah. So, to date myself, I guess, over 20, 25 years, I guess at this point in professional services marketing, kind of fell into it. I think our joke is that a lot of people wanted to be astronauts when they grew up, and here we wanted to be legal marketers or professional service marketers. But it's just kind of you kind of fall into these things. But it came from a background of my family was in finance. My mom was a lawyer. And so I did 10 years in financial services, but it was always really at pitches and proposals and, how do you win? How do you message things? And how do you reach across the firm and make connections? And, working in really big matrixed organizations, whether that was a Deutsche Bank or a KPMG, and then eventually getting into legal, you had to have a system because there's inevitably timing issues. You had to build relationships and cultivate relationships, and you had to figure out ways to organize information so that inevitably you're getting these questions at the nth hour. And how do you do that?
Right.
And so it was really necessity kind of being the mother of invention. We got to figure out we need an answer bank of some sort. This was back in the 2000s, and we need an Excel file that has who can answer what questions so we can
Right.
control F that and quickly realize that Craig was our answer for this and Jenny over here she was really quick with compliance um and yeah, moving into legal, and it was a little bit stepping backwards in time. They obviously they do very well, but just as we're talking, in terms of that structure. So um went over, it was a KPMG, and they grabbed a couple of us big four guys and said, hey, you know what, we want that. Whatever you're doing, and orals prep, and really just putting a lot of structure and process around that. How escalating RFPs, how do you price things?
Right.
Um, and so that's been really the role. But after I'd done that, and I guess I was 18 years of just pitches, and I said,
Wow.
I really want to swim upstream. I don't understand how these things come in. I just kind of get it. We've got a month.
Right.
Okay, cool. I don't. I think I'm going to be better at my role if I can kind of get above that
Yeah.
and start to understand how things are coming into the firm, how people are reaching out, because obviously it makes you more effective when you realize what's going on upstream. So moved over to Catton, and led the New York marketing there. They had been post merger, and as part of my role there, we were sort of integrating. Let's align by practice groups. Let's align by industries. Let's stop aligning by geographies. And so getting everybody to kind of start playing nicer in the sandbox with, the folks in LA and here, and how do we get them all talking? Really enjoyed that, and then had the opportunity to have the keys at Prior Cashman,
Yeah.
which was really enjoyable to really start integrating everything. Let's start building business plans, marrying a lot of my education. I went to school really around unique selling propositions and interaction between media and society and things like that. And so really getting into how are we targeting folks? What do they really care about? Let's reverse engineer things. How do we scale things more effectively? How do we avoid pitches entirely?
Right.
Was really where I now land is let's create the ability to surface information really quickly to partners. Let's try to automate that. So, when they're going in for a call, they're knocking people's socks off, saying, hey, you know what? I know what's happening in Charlotte. I know what's happening here. You don't even need to go to bid because I've already got this team set up, and, we've already developed an asset for you that, based on our prior data. that's the best way to be winning pitches.
Right.
And so that's really what I've been focused on here at 742. Now I have my own business for a few years, and been really enjoyable. It's very different. You get into firms and you earn trust, and they tend to not be shorter projects. I guess some consultants make kind of have a couple more project and roll off. And I've found basically had only a handful of clients in my 2 years, and I've just stayed with them 8, 9, 10, 11 months. And just kind of saying, hey, here, you identify 5 or 6 problems, and you fix a couple, and they say, keep going. And so,
Yeah,
that's
that's
enjoyable.
always, yeah. And if you're leading with that as the brand of who you are, it helps people understand that you're not going to just chop her in and chop her out and leave them with the keys to something they don't know how to drive.
Yeah, and
You know what I mean?
growing up as a former athlete, I love being on the team. That's the one thing. And as a solo consultant, you're kind of dropping things off and going, man, I hope this is all right. But just collaborating, and I think getting into the more you can understand the personalities, the more you'll understand. You know, everyone kind of knows the answer in legal. It's okay. We know we need a CRM, but these 10 people are never going to do it. Right.
Right.
That's your problem. If there were no problems, everyone just roll in a CRM and, it'd be great.
I was just on a call this morning where we were talking about that, and it's just like, wouldn't it be great if we built a culture such that ultimately the lawyers were actually asking for a CRM? Like if they needed a tool to
Yeah.
keep track of all the work that they were doing on the business development side. And we're like, oh, well, that'd be a good goal to then pursue. Like, right. Like, let's build something that makes the lawyers understand there's better ways to spend the money right now. And then ultimately, get that tool in to help manage the funnel, drive the pipeline, all the things that the reluctant sales force of that we're saddled with in law firms doesn't want to do. There are ways to make it easier.
You look at the Myers-Briggs, the personality. I'm autonomous. I hate being told what to do. That's why probably a lot of reasons why I became a lawyer. I'm super smart.
Right.
And so, the change management is it's so important. The psychology, you try to put a policy in place. It's not going to work, and I made that mistake early. Said, oh, I know the answer. Let's just force everyone to do this. And you could hear the chuckles down the hall.
Yep.
And, realizing that you got to get the coalitions of the willing. There's going to be 2 or 3 people who believe what you do, who have worked with you in the past. And if you do that, it's not just about helping them succeed, but it's about telling the stories in the right way.
Right.
Whether that's around a water cooler, whether that's letting something slip in a meeting that you doubled someone's business, whether that's, I had some pretty creative ways of, walking down the hall and, being a little louder as you turn the corner, and all of a sudden you're getting a phone call. Someone said, did I overhear that you, oh yeah, as a matter of fact, I did.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
And then it's a snowball, but it's got to
right.
be their idea.
Right. And because one of the big pieces of the Lawyer Book Builder program is that there's a cohort of lawyers that are going through the program together, and they get together and talk about it. I don't provide answers. The leader doesn't provide answers. They provide answers to each other. They peer coach each other because they trust each other, and it's this sort of rare experience that lawyers have where it's just like, oh yeah, you're another lawyer and you've been through there and that's what you did. Great. I want to know how you did it because I want to do it the same way. It's interesting. When you got
there's probably some referral relationships too there that
people certainly
sort of
it's huge. I've seen it. Yeah. I've seen it happen in those debrief sessions where lawyers that are in the same firm are suddenly talking differently to each other, and hey, I didn't know you knew that guy. I've been trying to meet that guy. Oh, well, let me introduce you. We'll all have lunch. Like it's that easy. Mm-hmm. It doesn't always happen that way, right? There's no guarantee that that's going to go on, but you don't find that stuff out unless you start talking or talking a little bit louder in the hallway, like you said. When you got the keys to the not the kingdom, but the keys to the big car at Pryor Cashman, was there a culture there already of business development at this bigger understanding of? I'm just trying to understand like what sort of obstacles you faced and how you overcame them versus like working with a full firm of willing participants. What was it when you got there?
Yeah, every culture's different. Every culture's going to have its positives and its negatives. Um, Prior is a very entrepreneurial firm. The numbers are pretty staggering. Not you didn't have one of the a lot of these firms coming from Weiss, and you've got one person originating 30 million and everyone else kind of in this fiefdom. you know
Yep.
Prior it was the numbers were pretty staggering. I think it was like 2/3 of the partners were originating more than a million, and I think you know maybe over 500K, and 30% were over 1 point. Like, it was pretty homogenous, and great, just great kind of entrepreneurial. Everyone who was out there and moving and shaking. Um, the interesting part is that obviously they develop relationships, but this firm has gotten exorbitantly bigger, and so probably grew 30% when I was there. And you're going to have those types of issues. Okay, now you got a new Miami office. We never had a Miami office. Okay, now really a focus on the LA stuff. Okay, now and so my job was really, how do I internally connect dots? How do I take, you know, we do a bunch of apparel work, and they do a bunch of work with entrepreneurs. Well, there's a lot of work kind of in the interim there. A lot of music, a lot of art. Well, if you clients are talking, can we bring accretive value to the clients? Can we try to expand things that are just really low hanging fruit? If we're doing, we did a joint venture deal with an apparel company and with our music person. Like, now we got all this apparel companies. Like, let's start
Right.
doing that mapping. So it was really the light bulbs, but I think that the bigger lessons I learned were really around the change management component. If
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't work one way, you just got to try different ways. Came up with a newsletter, no one's reading it. Okay, what? Did the content stink? Did the delivery mechanism stink? Try different read receipts. Okay, well, that doesn't, well, let's meet them where they are. Okay, they got partner breakfasts on Friday. Okay, they don't typically bring us in because they talk about us. But can I give an agenda to some partners? Can I start to say, hey, I don't need to be there, but what if we highlighted different things each week? Well, this is our personal time. Okay, what if we took 20 minutes? Okay, what if, and you're just kind of keep moving. I'm not going anywhere, guys. We're gonna get this done one way or the other. Um, and just getting different light bulbs to go off. And I realized it was sort of custom, and really what it was you got to earn their trust before they're going to listen to you about anything. So let's kind of reset. Let me get back and start working with really key people who showed um, really were showing demonstrative value. So where I kind of landed was I was the only, a couple of us BD, more marketing heavy function. And I said, listen, we don't have the opportunity to write business plans for everyone, to coach everyone. At the end of the day, 1 through 10, the people who are originating 5 million bucks or more, they don't really need me. Now, they want me to write a chamber submission, they want me to throw a party, great. But otherwise, that's there. And me spending time on 31 to 100 is probably low ROI, because some of them don't even want to do it. They had a pretty good dynamic with, they took care of the service partners. I always said I got two reports. We need to be in the top of origination, you need to be at the top of hours. You can't be at the bottom of both. So, but they kind of had a nice yin yang there, where the originators may not work so much. They had 5 or 6 folks who wanted to just work and didn't want to do that. So that was great. So really, what it was is, let's focus on 11 to 30. They've shown that they can originate. They've shown that they don't look at their shoes when they go to parties. They're not shy. They want to write. They want to speak, and just build with those 4 or 5 people. Can I double 3 or 4 or 5 people's business? And when I do that, those people start to wield a little more power. All of a sudden, they're becoming the practice group leaders, and all of a sudden, you're getting called into meetings. So it's almost picking that. I know that you and I were talking offline before, around the great work you're doing with associates, and in many cases, you're not going to teach an old dog new tricks. Trying to go into the 50, 60-year-old group and tell them what to do. We got white hair, thinning hair, whatever, all of it. So, there's a little cachet there, but it's generally a pretty hard thing with a very, accomplished, kind of already there person. They may take a couple of your ideas, but, what are you doing with that 35 to 50 set? And getting them, making them the next gen. Can you get leadership training? Can you teach their associates? Can you help build a culture? And, when they start bringing you into meetings and saying, hey, I really like what you're doing around this industry thing. I'd like an industry thing. Teach me how. That's when, you're starting to make it happen. And when they start kicking your resources down, hey, I've got this one associate. I think they could really do something.
Right.
Can you spend your time there? And now you get the ability to start requesting resources.
Right.
Right. Before, as law firms, your benefit of good work is more work. I used to get to help the firm bring in new business and, introducing them to, my entrepreneur friends who were, hiring them. And it was, it took a couple of years of doing that until they went, oh, you know what? This is cool. You could do it. And I was like, I've been doing it, but you guys are making me do it at night. Now I can do it during the day. And so being able to kind of kick some other work over and, but it's not something that's policy driven. We
Right.
very flat structures. Even at KPMG, the head of M&A told you what to do. You did it. It doesn't happen in law firms.
Right.
So,
right. And it's these small pieces that the smaller steps that are harder to communicate that ultimately come from that sort of persistent, gentle support that comes from training those folks and helping them understand, if we're talking about those associates and the sort of senior associate to newly minted partner level where things are getting really real, helping them get the foundational skills understood. So equipping them to do that and getting them to the point where they're not, Kristo, what do I do? But Kristo, what do you think of these three ideas? That's then, like you said, then that's when you start getting resources. That's when you start getting more attention. That's when you actually start moving the needle in a meaningful way that matters to those two columns that you were talking about earlier. Then the revenue follows, and then, more hours can come and that can go to other lawyers, and away you go. The cycle continues. So the firm and the culture where things were going really well, and there were lots of people that were doing a lot of origination. In your experience in those kind of firms, were they pretty siloed and reluctant to cross-sell and to spread out? That's one of the biggest roadblocks that I've seen in the many firms that I've been in since 1990. That there are some folks that just have this reluctance to open things up to share with other people or to collaborate with other people. And you were leaning into it earlier too, like, so what? let them do that on their own. We really want to work with the Coalition of the Willing, which is the other group that you were describing. Did you have any success breaking through that barrier, or should all the marketing and BD people listening right now just go, yep, just going to leave them alone and focus on the Coalition of the Willing?
Yeah, I mean, you got to start Coalition of the Willing, but it really depends on your seat. At the end of the day, people aren't cross-selling. They're not introducing, whatever you want to call it, solutions driven. They're not sharing their contacts. Okay, what is that? I think it comes down to three things, and every firm, no matter how big you are, how small you are. You don't trust your other partners, you don't know what they do, or you're not compensated to do so, or all three.
Right.
So, getting into that, is that an individual thing? Is that a firm-wide thing? So I started kind of just being curious. Hey, I don't care, man. It's cool, but like, what is it?
Right.
Do you know what? well, I never have time to do it. Okay. So now I'd sit down and spend 10 or 15 minutes and say, listen, you work in the sports group, you're in immigration and making it up. Here's what we're doing in the sports group. Otherwise, you know, if you didn't have meetings, or maybe sports is a bad example, but software, SaaS, there's not going to be too many, practice group industry cuts through whatever with, and just bringing that to bear, and then putting those right people in the room. And so, then I started, with case studies of saying, hey, listen, I know that this thing got dropped off and there's one central person, but all these people who have worked on, do all of you know that you guys have all been part of this whole ecosystem? And just kind of helping them to sort of connect those dots. It is reliant on good data. In a smaller firm, you can get anecdotal. In larger firms, it's amazing to me, you don't have the ability to surface information quickly.
Right.
Firms lack this experience database sort of narrative, right? And we did $1 million, and maybe they put it in general. Maybe they put it all in a litigation thing. And then they're making $1 million decisions on, should we hire more people? Well, we're up in litigation 30%. Well, you're up in litigation 30% if everyone coded it right. Well, did you close that matter, or is it still open? Well, yeah, I guess you don't close. Well, how do you expect this to be right? How do you expect to know that 6 months after you have an IPO, you do that? You just admitted to me that you didn't even code this thing by industry. So now we're making decisions saying, oh, we don't have well, it looks like we have an amazing aviation practice because that's the first one in the drop down.
Right.
We've never even done an aviation. So it's helping them to sort of understand the gaps there. But it's a chicken egg scenario. They don't want to invest in it because they don't think it's important, but it's not important because it's not right. So it's like CRM. It's,
Right.
I want the answer. I don't want to give it to you because I don't think it's valuable to give it to you. Because look, all the output I've gotten has always been crappy. Well, if everyone input it, then the output would be amazing. Then you'd see the value, then you'd input it.
Right.
So, that's why it's always starting with these pilots, and you get one person going, no, Mellor's right. You got to see this light.
Right.
And I ended up pulling out the CRM and using like an intro hive to try to change a culture to get people to say, hey, listen, we're delivering value just ahead of a meeting. Now, people hadn't really prepped for meetings. Now I'm getting that automated thing and I'm sending them saying, hey, you're going to meet with this biotech. Here's what we've done. Now they're saying, oh, well, I should bring this person in. I said, yeah, imagine if we talked about this 4 days before. We could do, and
Right.
they're, oh, okay. And so it's really kind of understanding how they work, meet them where they are, and drill something that's going to get somebody saying, hey, you know what? This kid's not an idiot. This group isn't, and it sounds weird, but that's where it starts. And,
Right.
and, you get some of that, and then you're coming on the meetings with them, and then you help them secure a couple of things. And then it's like, hey, I want this guy with me all the time. We need more of these people. And, you're off and running, and then people are buying into these systems, and,
Right.
but I think there's been a lot of PTSD, whether those are technology rollouts that go awry, whether those are, bad marketing people. I think and historically, we come from that marketing is a discipline.
Right. Right. And I think I think the training for people who are doing marketing roles, who are studying marketing roles, before they join a professional services firm, have a better understanding of what it's all about. Like, just the word has gotten out kind of about what it is, but you're right.
Sure.
It didn't used to be that way. If you were, I assume you in your time, you had opportunities to mentor young professionals on your team. What would you tell a young marketing and business development person today to be able to weather, to prepare themselves to weather the environment where you were talking about? The first assumption is, hey, this guy's an idiot until he proves himself wrong.
Yeah.
So how do you mentor people to come up, in that environment?
I'll tell you that I hire pretty much solely on intellectual curiosity.
Okay.
people who come in and, I will be talking to them and I'll drop some acronyms intentionally. And do they take notes? Do they write that down? Do they care at all?
Right.
And you can tell,
Do they pretend to know what it is? And yeah. Right.
and that's not even so bad, but at least write it in the column. I lived on Investopedia. When I first came in, I was having to code, experience. I didn't even know what experience, but I wanted to know, and I didn't want to be an idiot.
Mm-hmm.
And, you start there and, you're asking a ton of questions. And you got to be voracious around this. It's a wonderful opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Now all of a sudden you're the person who can connect dots. That becomes really valuable. People don't have time. Attorneys, they don't have time, right? And so whenever you're in a meeting, I'm always, I would say that you got to be intellectually curious, and then you got to think like a part, right? So you go and you ask somebody to a meeting. That person bills $1,500 now. Now you pull together a corporate group meeting. You're costing the firm $15,000. You better be friggin' good, whatever you're saying. Right? Does it need to be a meeting?
Right.
And
right.
if it is it going to bring more than 15K to the firm? Now you got these weekly meetings. Well, you're costing more than your salary if you don't have something good there. And I think that a lot of people are, hey, give me time. Let me swing through your office. I'm like, I'm not going to take 0.6 away from you. I'm going to get this thing 98% of the way there, because my best job is doing all this stuff while I'm salaried and getting you out there. And I almost pushing it that way. Hey, buddy, I don't need you to make the sandals decision on, what we're buying tchotchkes. You need to be out there building this M&A deal. And they're like, whoa, I'm like, hey, it's your money.
Right.
But I'll get a bigger bonus the bigger it is. So you go build, I'll go do this.
Yeah.
And I think having that sort of ownership is, and having that intellectual curiosity where you're the one coming in and saying, well, I heard about this and I heard about this. So this is, okay, now that's valuable to me. And now you're not doing the tchotchke conversation. You're talking about specific opportunities because you're looking at the new matter opens and you're uncovering stuff. Now you're adding value. Now this, hey, you know what?
Yep.
And you just need to flip a couple people and it's gonna come.
Yep.
But people who just, sit there and kind of, let's have a meeting. I'm not going to really prep for it. I'm busy too.
Oh man.
Like you're not going to last.
Yeah. Be brief, be bright, be gone. That was the advice that I got at one point. And I'm like, yep, that makes sense to me.
Ooh,
and if I lead with, yeah. And if I drive the prep for that with intellectual curiosity, I think that's the key.
Yeah. And, getting access, I think that people say, oh, I don't have access to this stuff. Well, because you haven't made a business case for it. Oh, I want all the numbers. They're like, all right, well, why would we just willy-nilly? We don't even show all the partners' numbers.
Right.
Well, listen, I got an idea here about cross-selling. What I'm going to do is start measuring percent of practice groups that we're penetrated in. I'm going to use that in the top 30 clients. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this stuff. My business plans are going to be based off the originating partners. Okay, give this guy the thing. Don't share it with anybody, but it makes sense. Just asking this stuff because, hey, at my last firm, I got it. Hey, take the time, button up. I love this. Be bold, or be bright, be bold.
Be brief. Yeah, be brief, be bright, be gone.
Brief, bright, and gone.
Yep, BBG. I like that too. Be ready to wow them and leave them with no recourse, but to say, yeah, let's do that. Or ask, or be ready to answer the tough questions too. Like that was the other part of it. It's just like, I'm ready to be challenged. And I think that lawyers are ready to be challenged, right? That's how they're wired. So, right. Stick to your guns. And, if it's really valuable, gear up for it and load it.
Yeah. The other one I didn't do that, I had colleagues who have done it better. I get along with everybody, but I didn't take the time to try to build relationships. Again, you've got to do it in a time-sensitive context.
Right.
And I think you can get caught up when you work at a law firm. I go in and I'm not like the niceties I don't really do. But those things are good. And, I've got colleagues who are, besties with the practice group leader, and they go out to lunch and said, how did you do that? That's fantastic. Well, because I took the 3 minutes to ask about their kids. I said, yeah,
Right.
yeah, sorry.
Right.
I was just
Elevators, hallways.
I was in the zone.
Yep. Yep.
So, those little things matter, and, building those relationships, not just at the partner level, but, at the gatekeeper level, as they say, with the
Right.
admins who have
Totally.
a ton of cachet, getting senior associates or even you teach juniors, right? They become seniors, and, they're the ones who are going to give you what we did on this matter. They're the ones who are going to help you with the chamber submissions. They're the ones going to review the pitches, those relationships go a long way.
And when the real answer from a lawyer to why aren't you doing more business development is I don't have the time. Well, guess who controls their calendar? Like you can find time. There can be appropriate time. Like you're absolutely right, and they can help. Like this, it would be important if all the lawyers in this practice group did this. What's one of the ways that we can get that to work? Right. Talk to the LAA. Yep. This just make just make sure this stays there.
Well, I heard a great line that was, whenever you're going to say, I don't have time, replace that with, it's not a priority.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the
Just
day,
be
everyone has
honest.
24 hours.
Right.
And, why aren't you at the gym? It's not a priority.
It's not a priority.
Everyone has time.
Yeah,
We all have the same time.
That's a tough one to
sleeping, the gym, whatever it is, right? Client development,
Yep.
Maybe building your client base is more important than keeping it. Maybe working the hours is more important. Maybe kids, whatever it is. But we all have the same 24 hours.
That really holds up a mirror, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes a bad one.
Yeah. Right. No, it's we got to be honest with each other. In the firms that you're serving now, with the work that you're doing, what are the conversations around AI in those firms?
Yeah. No, they're good. Again, I don't get too involved in legal project management. Hallucinations aren't that important to me.
Right. Right.
But it's just like the billable hour and efficiency. It's like, hey, you should be dying to be more efficient in your non-billable work.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm looking at AI for a number of different use cases, around the pitch proposal, targeting, topic development, identifying speaking opportunities. Those are easy, low risk, easy lift, get people comfortable with it. We're not asking this thing to scroll your calendar and draft your email or send your emails for you. We're not asking it to clonk into iManage and start reviewing docs. But, I think when the trust gets there, I think that certain firms have that. They got to really figure out their governance around that. But, I see that day. I've created formulas for how matters need to look so that they're consistent in any one brand. You can have that thing scroll through a doc and if then scenario that thing.
Yep.
Start to close matters. They haven't been identified. Can you surface things based off best timekeeper? There's a lot of work that can be done, I think, around that. Ultimately improving data quality and ultimately improving decision making. Ultimately, you still want the human making that decision, but at least being able to clean up your data. I think it can pull great first drafts. Embedding public information into executive summaries. So I see a lot of benefit there. A lot of the formatting stuff.
Yeah.
Claude does a better PowerPoint than me. In terms of the look and the feel.
Yeah.
And I've actually invested in kind of a rock star who's come in and is looking through not just I was dangerous, but really building this thing the right way around governance and skills and pointing and getting the information architecture right, creating those MD files and everything, and it's been pretty awesome.
That's great. Claude has risen to the top in my usage as well. It is you can train it and teach it so many things that really speeds up, like you say, that process of iteration, of drafting, of sifting, of pulling public information, of answering questions quickly. What's the industry standard for X, Y, or Z? Like it's really very good. It's become very good at that, and a big help to me as well.
Yeah, I mean,
I use it every
I'd
day.
be keen. Yeah, the targeting, you know,
Mhm.
look at the biotech field, based on, the publicly available, talk to me about client life cycles. How does that, well, they mostly get formed, and then they need this money, then they do this, then they do.
Mhm.
Okay, we'll map that against my current clients. Well, you've got 14 in phase one and 12 in phase two.
Okay.
Boink,
Yep.
I
There's
think there's a
there's
lot of
filter.
ways. Yeah, I always talk, the holy grail to me whenever I think about data is I call it the three eyes of data. You got individual data, which is, what did Kristo, did he read my blog post? Did he click on my bio? What did he then do? You've got internal data, which is, Kristo's company hired us for an IPO and then left us, in lurch after that because whatever reason. Then you got industry data, which is, after IPOs, 80% of firms have shareholder litigation.
Mhm.
Well, can I take what those three things and develop a picture there? And I think, now is the time that I'm saying, hey, you know what? I think you could take that Bloomberg Law litigation analysis, my litigation analysis, and then the litigator and what they're
Yeah.
doing and give me something. Now you're going to have to obviously test that, right?
Mm.
Nothing's, it's worse when, it's like you get those emails and then someone's super confident, like, but when you checked on this, I'm like, you had the wrong person. And now it's super,
Yep.
but,
Yeah.
whoever can figure that in, kind of internal, external individual, it's really
Yeah.
got a leg up. And, I think the big problem is though, is that, Caney will say, no, we're going to invest in AI. And people say, oh, we're going to invest in AI because someone else did. And it's like,
Hmm.
okay, why don't you figure out what your problems are? And then maybe AI solves them. Maybe a data person solves them. Maybe it's a mixture of something.
Maybe it's both.
But you can't just, it's like buy a solution and bang it into the problem.
Right.
It's like the CRM. It's like, what are you trying to solve? Don't just buy Salesforce because someone else has Salesforce. Like you don't
Right.
need it because your people will never do that.
Right.
And it's just dumb. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm following it closely as well. I always want to check in with folks that are, on the front lines, especially with multiple firms. Just sort of take the temperature of the vibe that's out there, amongst marketing and business development people. I mean, when I was at LMA in New Orleans, there was still a lot of trepidation around, the truth, the veracity, and the confidentiality. It's like, okay, well, then don't go in there pursuing that kind of stuff. Don't include confidential information. Use it differently, but also, it's not going anywhere.
Don't do it for legal analysis to start. Right.
Just
Stress test it
take
with
that off
event
the plate.
management.
Yep.
Right. Like
Yep.
if it works there, then use it in your day-to-day life.
Right.
Use it as your, if you're a youth hockey coach, use it there. Get comfortable with it.
Yep. And if you've got skills at sorting and filtering data in Excel spreadsheets that's faster than AI, great. But most of us don't. I do, but I wouldn't put myself up against AI right now because it's, that much smarter. But it's great stuff. Mike, I really appreciate the time. It's been fun talking all this real world stuff with you. It's great to meet you. I'm glad you reached out to connect with me. It's fun to talk through this stuff. So thanks for being on.
Absolutely. And thanks for what you're doing. Good stuff with Book Builder. And I'm excited to hear more about your other project. With your podcasts, with
the Irish Dance podcast.
I'm excited to bring that.
Yep. It's crossed the Rubicon into BD Catalyst a couple times so far. So you'd be surprised if you bring up Irish Dance, how many people are or know an Irish dancer. So one of my first podcast guests, Kaylee Green, is an Irish dance mom in Canada. And, we talked about the podcast, so it's kind of fun. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. It's
Bring
great.
your
Yeah.
passion, to the table, and
I mean,
good things are going to happen.
exactly. And there's always something to talk about, like that, I'm not holding back on that one because you never know. You never know. I wouldn't keep pushing it if a person wasn't interested, but an Irish guy like you with a niece that does Irish dance, it's a good opportunity to talk about it. So I'll send you a link.
Sure.
Thanks again, Mike.
Love it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The BD Catalyst, a podcast for law firm business development and marketing changemakers, is brought to you by Lawyer Book Builder and BDBuddy.ai, technology designed to help law firms create an exceptional culture of business development. Our host is Kristo Sween, and our editor is Melanie Cristostomo. The BD Catalyst is a production of the David Freeman Consulting Group. Learn more at davidfreemanconsulting.com.